Call of Duty is a franchise that's about as old as me. So the series has been through a lot of changes, some better and some worse. But the general theme they have always tried to keep was boots on the ground shooter. Now, they've always had futuristic themes before, but they always kept everything within its own time period and correct feel. So, tell me, why did Call of Duty go from stuff like this?
The rotten cancer of the Fascist Reich ravages Europe like a plague. The relentless drive into our motherland steals the lives of men, women, and children alike.
To whatever this cursed abomination is today.
Do we understand the plan?
I shoot Nazis. They die. That's my plan.
Believe it or not, Call of Duty used to be one of the biggest and most anticipated releases, rivaling the likes of Battlefield and prime Halo for quality. Oh lord, man, to be a child growing up in the 2000s, imagine it. It's Christmas, your mom, she comes gifting you games, and you get Halo Reach, Call of Duty Black Ops, and Battlefield Bad Company 2. What a trio. Now, to put this into perspective, if a parent were to try and replicate this today, for today's world with the current games out now, this child will be rewarded with none other than Halo Infinite, Black Ops 6, and Battlefield 2042? Oh, stinky. Believe it or not, guys, people used to line up for Call of Duty releases, right? They used to actually wait en masse. You know, I don't know if you guys remember midnight releases, but they were once a thing, and they went crazy. Thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars poured into marketing, all to hype up the game at the legendary midnight release. People camping outside in the freezing cold and sleeping bags for this type of stuff, man. So why has Call of Duty gone so far downhill? Why have they fallen off from their prestigious highs? Well, if we want to fully understand this, there's a couple points we have to talk about, right? First things first, the story. The story of Call of Duty games has always been a stark and deep reflection into our own lives and cultures, right? Many parallels can be drawn between Call of Duty and real-world events. Let's just take a look at Modern Warfare 2. Modern Warfare 2 really was the perfect story for its time of release, right? You had the fear of rising war tactics, ranging from IEDs all the way up to, of course, terrorist attacks, right? Did Call of Duty capture this? Well, the airport scene. And I'm sure we all remember the infamous airport scene, which was such a brutal scene during its time. It was banned in certain countries. It was censored upon re-release. It was a very stark and real reminder of a fear that many civilians genuinely felt. The idea of terrorism reaching their own soil. Of course, you can't forget about the unfortunate tragedy of 9/11 and the feelings that it left on the American citizens, right? The fear of nuclear weapons in the Middle East, right? This being used on American troops and American soldiers. So the game perfectly encapsulates all these feelings of fear, worry, all through its means of storytelling. As you all know, Shepard lost 30,000 men in the blink of an eye.
5 years ago, I lost 30,000 men in the blink of an eye. And the world just fucking watched.
This is a perfect example of a real-world fear that people had at the time. Nuke being used on troops. Massive lost life in an instant. Not to mention, of course, the fear of all this war reaching our own soil. And this can be seen as a direct representation when Russian forces invade American soil. Call of Duty was so much more than a series of events, hype moments, and garbage skins. These stories were not only a reflection of life, but genuinely amazing pieces of storytelling with compelling characters and interesting villains. I heard a quote a while back, character is only as smart as its writer, but I think you can apply that general rule to a story. I think a story can only be as smart and well written as the writer themselves are. Compare all what I just said, the deep storytellings of Modern Warfare 2 and how it was a direct response and reflection of issues facing America and the world at the time. Now to apply it to the straight doo-doo Call of Duty has been releasing in the past couple years. Take a look at a character like Shepard. He's such a memorable character, such a powerful reflection into a lot of people's own psyche during the time of these events. Shepard's loss was very traumatic. All of a sudden, 30,000 American lives just lost their lives, and there was nothing he could really do about it. So obviously he blamed American leadership and intelligence. So he wanted to avenge them, right? He wanted to create a state of American dominance again and avenge his fallen comrades. Shepard, his goals isn't necessarily inherently evil, but Shepard and his goals isn't inherently evil. He was obviously very scorned by the idea that the American public and that people in general, the world, would just forget about the sacrifice and loss of his men. He refused to let something like this happen again. This is reminiscent of many of the people's mindsets post 9/11. Many people, when talks came up of pulling out of the Middle East, are uncomfortable with that idea because they think that the lives lost therefore have died in vain. And Shepard is meant to be a stark reflection of where that line of thinking can possibly lead to. Now, you may not agree with what Shepard thinks, you may not agree with what Call of Duty is trying to say, but nonetheless, Call of Duty made a stance. Call of Duty was a form of art with a message to tell. It's very anti-war. World at War doesn't pull any of its punches. Modern Warfare 2 never pulled any of its punches. Call of Duty never pulled any of its punches. Whereas modern Call of Duty is more or less this movie industry. Its focus is hype moments, cool action sequences, spies and gadgetry. It's not a real reflection of war. Call of Duty used to have definitive style and themes. These games weren't simply just products to make money and to be as palatable as possible. They were forms of art. Am I the only one that misses milsims? With all these operators, it no longer even feels like real world soldier groups. In fact, it just feels like when I was a kid. In fact, it reminds me of, when I was a kid, I used to dump out all my toys, right? I used to dump them all out and then separate them to create my own little armies. And due to this, I'd end up pairing people like Shrek teaming up with Lightning McQueen to fight Optimus Prime and Master Chief. Combinations and themes that make absolutely no sense, believe it or not. And of course, you would never see these crossovers happening in real life. It just makes no sense. Call of Duty used to have a similar mindset, right? They used to keep their cosmetics and crossovers very limited and very uninvasive, right? And once again, thematic of Call of Duty's culture or themes. So tell me, why is Call of Duty trying to become the Temu version of Fortnite? Why is Beavis and Butthead fighting Stan while teamed up on a squad with Seth Rogen? It makes no sense. You want to look at the origin of all this, if you ask me? The origin, MW 2019. When it came out, I remember the skins were very, very detailed and very realistic looking. It was stuff that you could genuinely actually make or replicate in real life. Stuff that real soldiers might have. But as time went on and Cold War came out, things started to get more creative, more eccentric, shall we say, and more colorful. And then the theme started going from soldiers to suddenly fantasy, and you have dragon weapons, and you have zombies, and there's all sorts of stuff that just kept getting roped in. And then by the Vanguard, you had full-on just nonsense. By MW2 and 3, it had just fully lost the plot. And this is unfortunately all due to the ever-growing consumer appetite and a love of money. You see, remember microtransactions used to be a $3 skin pack for guns? They're super small, hardly noticeable, and the most outlandish thing you could buy was announcer packs. Yeah, I remember that time too. Now, microtransactions have become a billion, with a B by the way, billion-dollar industry. Call of Duty makes $1 billion from these microtransactions. Skins are now cooked up in a think tank made to be as marketable and mass-appeasing as possible, so as many people can buy them as possible. And guess what? The Call of Duty fan base continues to buy them. They continue to buy Call of Duty year after year after it releasing the same garbage game and story over and over and over. I haven't even touched up on how the story and actual quality of missions has fallen off. I haven't touched up on how the multiplayer makes no sense and has fallen off. I have not touched up how zombies makes no sense and has fallen off. I'm just focusing on microtransactions, but take a look how bad Call of Duty has become, and yet people continue to shovel this garbage into their mouths willingly. Call of Duty has quite literally been caught multiple times now, by the way, using AI to create their tools. What are we doing? And of course, the biggest victim of this all is zombies. We used to have a dedicated crew, right? 4 of the most interesting and likable protagonists that have ever been created. And now I get it. You can't capture lightning in a bottle twice, right? They tried with the Transit crew, and no one really liked the Transit crew, to be quite honest. But it is possible to still have a good crew. Take a look at Mob of the Dead, Call of the Dead. Many of these guest crews were actually pretty darn cool. Take a look at Shadows of Evil, another great example, right? A guest crew that I would have loved to see more, by the way. And now, people say, oh well, but Void, They have a crew. You have the crew you can pick, right? So you can be just like old times. No! I got so tired of hearing Weaver say the same line about his eyeball and, can you see that? I just did that with one eye. I mean, it was just insufferable. All of their lines are the most generic and military cornball sayings you could ever come up with. This is the stuff that people say that you know have never actually fought a battle in a day in their life. Their biggest their biggest fight was a wet willy from their bully in the 3rd grade. It makes no sense why these characters are this lame. And now apparently they're bringing back the crew I've seen before, and I just hope they just don't butcher them, right? Because ultimately the crew is great, but you know, it's the writers that decide these things, so we can only hope for the future here. And sadly though, these changes I don't think will ever be undone. The invasion of microtransactions, the lack of effort for Call of Duty's multiplayer, story, zombies, all of that, I just don't think will ever change. Why should they? They make so much money. People continue to buy their microtransactions. People say, oh, well, Void, well, what about Battlefield? Battlefield's a good game, right? Well, first of all, 2042 was... we don't even talk about that. Just now, we have Battlefield 6 coming out, right? And Battlefield 6, from all what I heard, actually looks good for once, right? But guess what? It still isn't competition. They could make the best Battlefield game ever. They could genuinely make the most perfect Battlefield game you could ever create, and it still would not get rid of Call of Duty. You know why? Because they're two different genres. I'm so sick of it. I hear people say all the time, oh, but Battlefield. It's not a competition. Battlefield is large-scale, militaristic, mil sim-like gameplay or whatever, right? And it's like a sandbox. Whereas Call of Duty is a small arcade arena shooter, right? It's a small little arcade. That's all it is. It's arcade shooter. That's the main, core replay of Call of Duty, right? That's the main thing people play. Battlefield doesn't have that. And Lord forbid you talk about Battlefield's Battle Royale. Ugh. I mean, sure, maybe some people might leave, but by far the majority of people aren't. And that's what I feel bad for, right? I feel bad for the Call of Duty fans, because what else do they have to play? Unfortunately, they're stuck in a never-ending nightmare. They're desperately hoping and praying that things get better, but it just simply won't. And I wish we could turn back time. I wish Call of Duty could be something to be proud of again, something to get anticipated and get hyped over. Sadly, I think they're content with sucking turbo aids. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. The video here is a bit more unorthodox. I kind of was more so just ranting into the mic, less of following a script this time. So let me know what you think, right? Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And most importantly, remember, stay safe, stay sexy. Bye-bye.